Welcome to the Brandy Show, Conversations with. The idea for this type of show came from the very concept of podcasts. They're available to anyone at any time since they stay posted on the internet portal indefinitely. Podcasts that are time sensitive, that deal with issues of the day are fine, but after a month or so, they can be out of date. Taking advantage of the technology, it made sense to me to create a program podcast that would last. It's as current the day it is posted to 6 months or a year from now. So I hope you like our series Conversations with. Thanks for stopping by. Our conversation today is with two-time Michigan football captain and national champion Jon Jansen. Jon had an All-American career at Michigan and led the Wolverines to their last national championship in 1997. We get into specifics about that very special season and talk about the great players he stood next to on that incredible journey. We also talk about his days in the NFL playing for the legendary Joe Gibbs of the Washington Redskins. And we spend some time on his new career as a broadcaster for Michigan football. Here's my conversation with Jon Jansen. So, Jon, here's the deal. Reading up on you and getting the information and doing my research, I see that the nickname is Rock. What's the deal with the nickname Rock?
Well, it's evolved over time. When I was in high school, I had the same nickname went from high school, college to the pros. I like the meaning a lot more when I was in the college and the pros because, I started 50 games here and it became a symbol of, Jon was always there. He was the rock of the offensive line, the rock of the offense. He was the captain. Same when I was with the NFL. But it actually originated my freshman year of high school. I was the, freshman playing varsity. And there were my older brother was a junior. And some of the seniors, obviously, they have to initiate, which we used to be able to do to some freshmen. And they kept telling me I was dumb as a bag of rocks. and so it kind of evolved in, from, being dumb as a bag of rocks to then my nickname was Rocco. And then they just, by the end, they shortened it to Rock. And it did end up meaning what it meant here at Michigan and at the NFL, that I was dependable, but it started out being dumb as a bag of rocks.
How did it go from Michigan to the NFL, though? That's usually where those nicknames stop.
Yeah.
Obviously, you did something at Washington to let them know I'm that guy.
It wasn't anything I did. And there's no secrets anymore with this social media and cell phones and all that was just starting to get going. And, somebody had had come and called me Rock, and, some of the other guys picked up on it. And it was the same thing there after, we had so much turnover at Washington that by Marty Schottenheimer was the head coach my third year, and I was elected captain at that point. So, it wasn't that it was just I was the only guy left, other than our long snapper who was there for 9 of my 10 years in Washington. But there was so much turnover that I ended up being I was the Rock. I was there for 10 years when there was so much turmoil and turnover and coaches and players. And
so during our broadcast this year, you don't mind if I call you the Rock, Jon Jansen? Will you go with that?
I've heard you talk about the Dancing Panda, Bench Mason. If I can get a nickname, and there's obviously Crash.
Yep, Crash.
So if I can be the Rock, then I'm there.
You will be the Rock. Nah. One of the things I want to talk about was 97, the last national championship Michigan has ever won in football, and you were the captain on that team. Mm-hmm. But what people don't remember, they remember the big picture, Jon, that they won the championship. They beat Washington State in the Rose Bowl. But what people don't remember is going into that year, this was a team that wasn't expected to win much, if anything. As a matter of fact, you didn't really have a starting quarterback. It was between Griese, Dreisbach, and Brandy, wasn't it?
It was. And there all of the articles, which we always say we don't read the articles, but that's a lie. We know what's going on. And the one that really hurt and stuck with our team, and I think really every Michigan alumni, was that the M stood for mediocre. Somebody, and I don't remember who it was, but I remember reading that the M stood for mediocre. Because we were about to be the first class that graduated that hadn't gone to the Rose Bowl, hadn't won a Big Ten championship. And that was not a legacy any of us wanted to live with. As it turns out, we were able to be the first team to win a national championship in 50 years. So that legacy can obviously be rewritten and changed just in terms of just based on flat determination.
Going in, though, as an offense, and you were the leader of the offense in the offensive line, one of the really last guys there. I mean, I was reading where Hutchinson came over from the defensive side of the ball, turned out into being an all-pro on offense.
Yeah, Hall of Famer.
But from your perspective as an offense, did you guys wonder and say, God, who's going to take snaps?
We did because, and I've used this example a couple of years ago when we had Mason Cole starting at left tackle as a freshman. We had, people ask, how can you be good? Well, I just point to the 97 team. Zach Adamy and I were the only returning starters. I was at right tackle. Zach was at right guard, but they moved him to center, so he was at a new position. We had two redshirt freshmen start on the left side, Jeff Backus, Steve Hutchinson. We had, and the right guard was a platoon of players. It was Dave Brandt, Mo Williams, and Chris Zeman. So we had a bunch of guys coming and going. So it wasn't like you could look at it and go, well, they had five guys start, all five positions for 2 or 3 years. That's why they were good. No, we were just a team and an offensive line that said, you know what, I was tired of hearing about, Joe Kokozo and Everett and all of the great offensive lines. You want to be a part of that, but you also want to be able to write your own legacy while you're here. And that's what I tell the kids now. I tell Ben Bredesen, hey, you want them to stop talking about Jake Long, Jon Jansen, Jeff Backus, Steve Hutchinson? Then go out there and make them stop talking about us. All of us would love to talk about Ben Bredesen, Michael Onwenu, John Runyon Jr., much more than we'd like to talk about what we did 20 years ago.
Scott Dreisbach started 11 games the previous year. He doesn't start the next year, and you're going, what are we doing? We got the toughest schedule in the country. Was Brian Griese, like, once he took over and got in a huddle, you guys said, this is our guy?
No, not at all. And honestly, to us, it didn't matter who the quarterback was going to be. And I don't think Coach Carr knew up until a week ahead of time who it was going to be, whether it was going to be, Brian Griese, Scott Dreisbach, or Tom Brady. We had three great guys to pick from. And we went with the veteran, the guy who had the most years, not necessarily the most experience. And it proved to be a great pick for us. Brian was, and honestly, Brian, he had an issue up on campus a year or so ahead of time. Had he not had that issue, I really think that he may have been elected captain that year, which allowed me to be the captain. And, maybe I would have been the following year. I don't know. But, he was a type of guy that had that leadership quality, had made a mistake, came back and earned his way back onto the team, earned his way back into what we felt was a guy that we would trust in any given moment at any given time. And the year that he had, and I'll just tell you one quick story. During that season, there were a lot of great stories, but the Iowa game, down 21-7 at halftime, Brian came in and we all knew that none of us had played a great half. And Brian came in and he said, guys, that's the worst half of football I've played maybe in my entire life. I'm not going to let that happen in the second half. And we went out there and everybody knows the story now. We ended up winning 27-24 and Brian had a great second half, hit Jeremy Tooman for a touchdown and the defense played great. But, that was the type of player that Brian was. That's why that team was so good, because we had guys step up at moments when we needed them the most.
To point out, you were a 2-year captain, and we'll talk about that later in that leadership role that you've played on 2 teams, which is rare at Michigan. It's rare anywhere, I think, but we'll talk about that later. You talked about Brian coming into halftime and saying that this team has a bunch of legends about it. And I want you to clarify a legend at the beginning of the year. There was a team meeting. Everybody was saying, what are our goals? What are our goals? The word is Woodson stood up and said, hey, guys, let's just win. Did that happen?
It did. It did, and so you were a part of the whole the process here in terms of when you elect captains, and then all of a sudden the coaches leave the room, the captains go up to the front of the room. It was me and Eric Mays, who hadn't hurt himself yet, and we're up there and we're going through our red letter games and how many first downs we want on offense and stuff that we had done with other guys for 4 years, and the result was always 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, and it was mediocre Michigan. And so we're sitting up there, and I'm sitting up there, and I'm looking. We're writing these things down, and they're like goals are supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to measure them. You're supposed to be able to do all this. And Chris Floyd stood up and had something passionate to say and about not winning championships, and then Charles stood up and just said, "Hey, you know what? All we have to do is go out there and just win." And that's when Eric and I both looked at each other and were like, we started racing the board, and we put up just win. And I don't know necessarily.
In many ways, he just kind of cut through the crap.
He cut through the crap, yeah. I mean, there was the definition of insanity. We were going through the same process. We were going to get the same result until we did something different. And, again, like I said, goals are supposed to be measurable. They're supposed to be attainable. You're supposed to be able to track your progress along the way. When you have a goal, one single goal that says just win, well, we almost lost to Notre Dame. And what if we had? And then all of a sudden, there's you could play the what if game the whole way down the line. And I preface that by saying, when we went and told Coach Carr didn't bat an eye. And he was a guy that was very much into setting goals, and this is how you do things. And he knew, I think, at that time that this team was going to be different, and there was something different about it. So when we came with a goal that said just win, he's like, all right.
Works for me.
Yeah, let's roll.
The other thing, Coach Carr is one of those guys, you know him real well, and I know him real well, that has an interesting way of motivation. I say when I played for Bo Schembechler, he motivated you with a punching glove right in the nose. Uh-huh. Lloyd led you to motivation and let you drink. Bo shoved your head in the water and said, "You will be motivated."
Yeah.
Lloyd led you there. And in 97, he led you there with this Into Thin Air book about climbing Mount Everest and taking just one step at a time. I thought that was brilliant on his part. And with your telling me that the just win deal, it was like each game, just win. That's the next step. That whole thing meshed together into a wonderful motto, into a wonderful idea of how you were going to play that season, didn't it? Lloyd, he's a beauty. All great coaches know what buttons to push, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And he brought in a guy named Lou Kosiski, who had been on one of the expeditions to get up to reach the top of Mount Everest, top of the world. And he was on the expedition where the book was generated Into Thin Air, where there were so many people that had passed. And he had talked about the decision at the very end to whether to go for it or not. And his decision at the time was not to, and it ended up saving his life. But, there are so many different. You've got Base Camp 1, you've got Base Camp 2, you've got the Khumbu Ice Falls, you've got all of these different steps along the way, and it was an unbelievably great comparative experience that we had with him, in him sharing that with us, because we were trying to climb a mountain. To us, winning a Big Ten championship or winning a national championship was a mountain because none of us had done it. It was something that we were trying to reinvent. I try and use that example now with the guys that are here. They don't have anybody on this team that's won a championship. And so it's a new experience. They are climbing that mountain again. And it's comforting to know that it's been done before. Whether or not you have experience or somebody has, it's been done before, so it can be done again.
And you guys bought into this hook, line, and sinker. Not to say that that's a negative connotation. It's not. But the idea is the big picture was the summit of Mount Everest. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the national championship. But at the beginning of the year, you guys didn't talk national championship.
No, we never have. And we still don't now. We talk. I mean, it's a little bit different now because of the playoffs and all that stuff. But it's always been the Big Ten championship and the Rose Bowl. And that's the way it'll always be at Michigan. It is how many Big Ten championships? We got 42 of them. We're looking for 43. And that is the beautiful part of being a Michigan Wolverine. It was, this is attainable. And if you attain this, you attain a Big Ten championship, you'll be in the conversation for that national championship. Now, you've got to do something special to make that happen, but the goal is a Big Ten championship.
And you came into that year with maybe it was the toughest schedule in the country. So all of this is kind of not playing in your favor. And you guys kind of beat the odds, I think. Do you all think like that now? Because, again, the big picture, people look back and say 97 won a national championship. But that year was a whole lot different. There were obstacles in your way that I think people don't realize you overcame.
Well, and it was Notre Dame. I know it was a home game, but it was still Notre Dame. Colorado at the time, Colorado was playing great. They were a top 5 program. And then at the end of the year, I'm skipping over all of the Big Ten opponents because we had Michigan State.
Here's the stats for you. Ready? 6 of your last 7 games you played top 20 teams. 3 of your last 4 were top 10 teams. Mm-hmm. That's what you had to go through to get to the Rose Bowl in Washington State to win the national championship.
And the 3 final games was a Penn State, Wisconsin, and Ohio State. You put that lineup now out there, you put that lineup at any point of those 3 programs, and it's a tough road.
2 games I want to talk about. One, Iowa. There's one play in that game that I think kept your undefeated season alive. In the second half, I think Griese throws on a 3rd and long, a pass, and it probably should have been intercepted, but it was an interference call. And it was a legit call, but it gave you guys a first down, and you were down. I thought that was the huge play. I'm sure everybody on that team knew how big that first down was.
There's no question. You're down, and you're looking for anything to happen, any positive thing. And, sometimes you can make it happen. Sometimes, hey, the ball bounces the right way, the flag drops the right way, and we'll take it. So it was definitely, if we didn't get that first down, I still, I'd like to believe that we'd find a way to win. It would have made it a lot tougher.
The other game was Penn State. You're in Penn State. It's number 1 against number 2 or number 2 against number 3. I'm not sure which. But that was billed as the game of the century, the latest game of the century. And from the get-go, was it Glenn Steele?
Yeah.
First play of the game that sacked their quarterback, and I mean planted him. And from that moment on, you guys were a juggernaut on the road and blew Penn State out of Happy Valley.
It was the most dominating performance I've ever been a part of. As a football player, as a broadcaster, whatever. That game was over. When Glenn Steele broke through on play 1, it was over. And, you talk about Coach Carr being a guy that led you to, being able to drink the water.
Leads you to the water and lets you drink. Schembechler beat you over the head with it.
It was, and I like to tell this story because it's such it kind of gives you the idea of the relationship between the players and the coaches and the fun that we had playing the game of football, the fun that I don't think that you can be a successful team if you don't have fun. And so we would go through the scouting report every, Sunday at that time. We played Saturday, we'd have Sunday, and we'd have Monday off. So we'd go through the scouting report on Sunday, and he would always pick out 1 or 2 guys. And then he would say, men, we're going to go through the scouting report. And, I called up Joe Paterno, and I told him, LeVar Arrington, Courtney Brown, those are some good players. He goes, I'll give you Glenn Steele. I'll give you Sam Sword. I'll tell you what, I'll give you our whole linebacking room just for one of those players. And it doesn't have to be both. Just give me either LeVar Arrington or Courtney Brown. You know what Joe Pa said? He said, no, your guys aren't worth it. And so, in context, you're thinking of that and you're going, why would Coach Carr do that? But it was every week you want to be the guy that nobody would trade for because Lloyd mentioned your name. It was important to him, and we would go through it, and it was, same with Wisconsin. I'll give you, I'll I'll give you our whole offensive line just if I can have your backup tackle. We don't even know what this guy's name is. And you know what? What was the coach at the time?
Barry Alvarez?
Barry Alvarez said, no deal. And so that week, obviously, it was Glenn Steele. And then Glenn breaks through on the opening play of the game, sacks the quarterback, and the game is over. And I really believe that little bit was a great motivator for all of us, but it was so much fun, and it just gives you kind of an insight into how in touch Coach Carr was with the players.
There was another play in that game, and I talked to you about it when you guys had your reunion. Dadrian Taylor's playing safety at the time, and they throw a pass to their tight end, and it's right in front of the Penn State bench. And Dadrian Taylor was like a heat-seeking missile. And I don't mean that to be an analogy. I mean it to be that's what he was.
Yeah.
And he hit this guy. You could hear the sound in that entire stadium right in front of their bench. And I'll never forget broadcasting the game. Their bench saw the hit and backed up out of the way. They didn't want any part of Dadrian Taylor. And their crowd behind their bench kind of went, oh, this is a different football they play.
Yeah.
That play, and Dadrian never played another down after
neither
that.
Did the tight end.
And neither did the tight end. But that play, I think, typifies that season. Dadrian Taylor, who's he? We got Charles Woodson. We got Sam Sword. We got Marcus Ray. We got Andre Weathers. We got Glenn Steele. Mm-hmm. Dadrian Taylor made one of the biggest plays, I think, of all Michigan defenses in that national championship year. You guys knew how important that was, didn't you?
Yeah, it was, because there were plays all along the season that set the tempo of in football. You've got to have an identity. Whether on offense, at Michigan, it's always been 3 yards in a cloud of dust. We love to run the ball. We got to be physical. We got to dominate the line of scrimmage. On defense, it is the willingness of all 11 guys to hit. And I think Dadrian Taylor, especially in that one single moment, identified with years and years of Michigan football. And we all looked at that going, all 11 guys have a will and a want to hit, and that symbolized everything.
I told you I was going to get back to this. It's a huge honor. I would have loved to have been a captain, but I wasn't. All seniors are leaders on Michigan teams. I know that. But 2 times you were named captain, once as a junior. That's pretty lofty territory. How did you feel, Jon Jansen, about being captain twice?
In the moment, it's you realize the honor it is, and it was a tremendous honor to be voted on by your teammates. Coaches didn't have anything to do with it. It was all about your guys in the recognition of doing things right, hard work, somebody they could look up to, somebody they could look to in time of need.
And that's what you need to do to lead. That's where you took being a captain, right?
Absolutely. It was, not only what I was, tasked to do at that point, but what I had done up to that point. All of it was wrapped into it. And now that I look back on it, obviously with the perspective of 20 years of experience and watching other guys come through and then understanding more of the history of Michigan football and what it means to be a captain, I look back on it with tremendous honor, and I've been nominated for a lot of different awards. The only one that really matters to me is the one that my teammates gave me, and that was being captain.
It's the only one you're going to really put on your resume and make sure it gets there, right?
Yeah, and I've told my kids, and this may sound morbid, but I've told my kids, I told Lisa, I said, hey, when all is said and done, and I'm in the ground, the one thing I want on my tombstone is he was the captain at Michigan.
That's wonderful. I will make sure if I'm around, I'll make sure that gets done. Then you go to the NFL and you go to Washington. And the key there is I want to talk to you about you play for another iconic coach, Joe Gibbs. Tell me a little bit about Joe Gibbs.
Joe was, this was the second time around for Joe. And the one thing that I've always appreciated about almost every coach that I've had is their willingness to learn new things every year about the game of football because it changes game to game, week to week, year to year. And Joe Gibbs spent, I can't remember, it was 8 years, 10 years outside the game of football. He retired already had a bronze bust in the NFL Football Hall of Fame. So we've got a Hall of Fame coach coming back to coach us. And he came in, and it was very obvious that the game had changed a lot from when he coached. And not just the game, but the business of football, free agency. A lot of the things that we think about now as having always been there wasn't the case. Roster size, the way you practice, everything was so different. And so I got a chance to see a Hall of Fame coach who was very successful, Super Bowl winning coach, come in and humble himself to say, I've got to figure this out. I've got to find out what has changed, why it's changed, what advantages we can take. And the first couple of years were rough. And then by the time we hit year 3 and 4, he had started to figure it out. And I believe it, and he ended up retiring a year that Sean Taylor passed. And it was so emotional for all of us involved that it would just, he didn't want to coach football anymore at that point. And had he kept going, I really think that we would have been on track to be a Super Bowl contender.
When something like that happens to Sean Taylor, a teammate of yours, hey, I don't care where you are. If you play for a football team, that's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Now, every year because you go through your worst times, and those guys watch you. They see you sweat. They see you get sick because you're working so hard, and then you go to the locker room, and you know their families. But that's a bond. When an incident like happens with Sean Taylor, how much does that affect that team?
It's unbelievable. And I've got a couple of examples. Sean died during the season. He was murdered, which makes it even worse. And just knowing that there were so many variables in place that led to him being where he was at that moment. And every guy spends time thinking about what Sean meant to our team, what he meant to the NFL, what he meant to the position. He was really reconstructing what it meant to be a strong safety because he was one of the greatest football players I'd ever been around. And so when you think about all the different things that conspired to put him in that one place, that one time, you really realize how finite life is, and that there is a greater power, and that if it's your time, it's your time. And there's not much you can do about it. So, hug the kids, hug your teammates, tell them you love them, and fight for everything you could possibly do. And, we've lost, I know you've lost teammates.
Yep.
We lost Ben Huff off the 97 team, and that was a tragedy. Scotty Panique, we lost him off of the 98 team. And it's when you lose a teammate, especially, and I think this is getting back to being a captain, when you lose a teammate, all of those guys seem so special to you. And you also look back and you think, well, I didn't let them down when I was here, but what did I not do since we left? And there's just, you lose a teammate in season, out of season. It's hard to take.
And after you're done, our captain, Frank Gussick, I don't know whether you ever met Frank, but Frank Gussick was our captain. He was a little kid from Cleveland, Ohio. Had no right playing Big Ten football. Had no right. But his heart was so big that he could not play. We could not play him. Went to Mass every day. I mean, in college, in the 60s, when, it was free love. Hippies were all over the place. Frank went to church every day. Frank was a guy that if I had a daughter, I would have forced her to marry him. That's what a great guy he was. And Frank died of cancer. And we had about 10, 12 guys go to his funeral in New Orleans where he was. Yeah. And one of the guys there was Les Miles. Les Miles was coaching LSU at the time, but he had known Frank. And that's how and I know lessons learned in football. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things, the life and death, the importance of friendship, and what guys give to the game and how they affect you. And I'm a better guy because of Frank Gussick.
No question. And because of the discipline he had, the heart that he had, and the tough times that football players go through, whether it is off-season conditioning, spring camp, summer conditioning, the things that you experience during a college football season, those are all shared experiences.
The difference, you've been to the NFL, you've been to college football. The difference between the two games. We talk about the 97 season special moment and the fact that on your tombstone you want captain. Then you go to the NFL, it's a different deal there. You have a unique perspective to tell us what's the difference between the two games, because they're not the same.
No, they're not even close. Not even close. There's so many differences. The one and most obvious is just the speed of the game. Every player at the NFL is the best from their hometown. They're the best at their college. They're the best that has ever, somebody in their life is the best athlete they've ever known is that guy. And you put all of those guys into a team or into a league, and you mix them all up and you see who's going to be the best of the best. The talent level, the skill level, the discipline, all of that is so much higher at the pro level. But the biggest difference for me is, and I love to play the game of football. If they put a ball down in this room right now, I would do anything I could to earn the tackle position on this team.
Play another snap.
I would give anything to play one more snap, but I would give anything to play one more snap at Michigan, because the passion that you have for your university, it is 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 3 years that you spend at a school, but you live and breathe and you eat and sleep. You sweat and you bleed with those guys. When you get to the NFL, and when people say money changes everything, it sure as hell does, because it is a job. You show up, and not only that, but it's the time of your life too, where you are supposed to have a job. You show up at 8 a.m, you go through all of what you do in your job, and you go home at night. You're not living with the guys, you're living with your wife and your kids, and everybody has their own life, and it's the different feeling, it's a different relationship, the team dynamics are different, and the speed of the game is different, but boy, the passion for the game is still the same.
People want to know names. People want to know about what you did when you were playing in the NFL. And one of the famous matchups, Michigan's Jon Runyan and New York Giants' Michael Strahan. Mm-hmm. You had plenty of those too, because you were in the NFC East. You had Strahan a few times, didn't you?
Twice a year. And I like to tell everybody, everybody that knows him on the Good Morning America now, I'm the one that put the gap in his teeth.
Does he know that, or will he admit to it?
He probably won't admit to it, but if he wants me to make it bigger, I can. But no, and so I say that in everybody knows I'm joking around, but it's the matchups. It was, Jon Runyan, Mike Strahan, Jon Jansen, Mike Strahan, Kevin Green, Reggie White. It was,
but it's what it is, John, and you talk to this too. It's about matching up against the best, being challenged. I want that matchup. Absolutely. I want to see what I can do against that guy, because that makes me better, right?
So I can't remember if it was my second game. My first game was against the Dallas Cowboys at home. I think my third game was actually, my second game was here in Detroit in the old Silverdome against Robert Porcher, which was a great player and a big-time learning lesson. Then we played the Giants in the Meadowland with Mike Strahan. And before that game, Terry Robisky, who was our father of an Ohio State wide receiver and great wide receiver in his right for, I think it was the Oakland Raiders.
Yes.
He was our wide receivers coach, and he got up and gave this passionate talk, because I'm a little rookie offensive lineman, and we're playing against the great Mike Strahan. And he's going on and on for 7 or 8 minutes about how great Mike Strahan is, and he's already got him elected to the Hall of Fame. He's had like one good year. This is at the beginning of his career as well. And he goes, and at the end of it, he said, this is I think the difference between Michigan and everybody else. He knew what it meant to be a Michigan man, Terry Robisky. And he said, I want to know if Jon Jansen is a true Michigan man. Will he stand up in the Meadowlands and face Mike Strahan, one of the greatest pass rushers, one of the greatest defensive players in the game at this time? Will he be able to do it? Is he a true Michigan man? When he threw that out there, there's nothing I could do at that point. I was going to go out there, scrape, claw. I was going to kick him in the nuts if I had to. I mean, that's just what you have to do. And, it was the confidence they had in me, but it was also the confidence that and the realization that Michigan is special.
He's not the only coach that did that in the NFL. I don't know if you've ever seen the NFL films with Bill Parcells. Mm-hmm. And he's getting ready, and he tells Jumbo Elliott, he says, hey, Jumbo, that ain't Michigan State over there. And he was doing the same thing. He was pulling on those Michigan heartstrings to get a performance out of Jumbo Elliott.
Mm-hmm. They know what it means, especially to be an offensive lineman
in
Michigan.
They do. That's great. Then you go, you're now in broadcasting. When you were in school, when you were going through, you have had a career in football. Now there's a second career. And at one point you thought you might want to coach, but you wanted to somehow migrate back to Michigan, didn't you? And you're here.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a part of Michigan football. And my career took me in one direction, and it's been a little bit of a path to get back. But there was this gentleman that used to broadcast our games. I think his name was Brandy, and I saw him and what Michigan meant to him, and the fact that he played here. Then he got a chance to broadcast the games, and I thought, that is the best job in the world. That's a dream job. And to listen to the passion come out, and I'm not saying this in a joking way, because you've had an influence on so many people, so many Michigan fans, that your voice, and this happened to me the other day, and I thought, you know what? If this must be what it's like to be Jim Branstad or Dan Deerdorf. I was having a conversation with someone, and somebody from around the other side of the wall said, that must be Jon Jansen, because I recognize his voice.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? That is, I could know your voice anywhere. I'd know Deerdorf's voice anywhere. And I thought, if a Michigan fan could recognize me for my voice, I thought, maybe I've got a future.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world, first of all, that I found my way back here, and I was able to broadcast Michigan football. And back in the 80s, 70s, late 70s, early 80s, I didn't know. I'm just working. I'm just trying to get, but I knew I wanted to gravitate toward Michigan if I could. But there's no guarantee. But once I got here, I said, I'm holding on to this. There are people out there right now that are broadcasters. I want you to retire. You got to leave, pal. And I'm going, not yet. Yeah. Not until they take that microphone out of my cold, dead fingers. Because I love it so. There's a saying that if you have a job you love, you don't work a day in your life. Guilty.
Yeah.
And I'm it's great to hear you say that, because that's the way I feel about this university, this program, and the fact that I've had the ability to the lucky opportunity to be here from the 70s all the way up to now 2019.
I don't know if you remember me asking you this question, because I've asked you it a number of times, and it was when I first was in the NFL, because I didn't know. Nobody knows how long they're going to play.
Right.
Then when I got out, I said, hey, how long are you going to
I remember
do
you.
this?
No, I do that.
And
you actually asked me that when you were with the Lions in your last year.
Absolutely. I've asked you about every time I see you before I got a chance to work with you and Dan and Doug. And, and you would always say, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years go past, and I'd ask you the same question. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years. So I'm going to ask you it now.
Okay.
Because it's going to be timeless. It's going to be on this recording. You're not allowed to edit this out.
I'm not going to.
How long are you going to do this? All Michigan fans.
I'm going to answer that with a question to you. If you had my job, how long would you stay? Until they carried you out with your dead, cold fingers? That's how long I want it.
Well,
John,
good.
Good,
because we need to listen to you.
By the way, you got a podcast of your own, and it's with the University of Michigan. It's called In the Trenches. Where can people hear that?
They can go to MGO Blue. And they can find it on the website in the trenches. They can also go wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, TuneIn,
and you can go to mgoblue.com, I think, and pick it up too, or find it.
Yeah, mgoblue. That's the easiest way. Just go to mgoblue, and if you're searching around for some Michigan football, type in my name or in the trenches, and it'll pop right up. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Like you, I mean, when you get a chance and you see these kids come in as freshmen, and then you get, and I know that you've had this experience because Aiden Hutchinson and his dad played here.
Yeah.
John Runyon and his dad. So you've seen.
We saw John and his dad at dinner the other night at Ruth's Chris.
We did, and so I played with John, and now I get a chance to talk about and tell stories and about his son. But that's what's great about what I do with the podcast, what you've been able to do, and why we want to do this for so long is because the tradition, the history, the families, the people, the relationships are so great.
It's the people, too. You and I have been talking Michigan football here for nearly 40 minutes. This has been fun.
We could keep going for
I know we could
40.
keep going for another 40. Last question. Isn't it odd, maybe not, I'm really teeing this one up for you, that the current University of Michigan radio broadcasts have 3 offensive tackles as 3 of the 4 talents. Mm-hmm. Is that odd to you?
It's not odd. It seems obvious.
I couldn't agree more.
When you think about the guys that and we say that jokingly, but this is, I believe, to be more fact than fiction. The quarterback has to know what's going on the field. Obviously, they've got to know a lot about the offense, a lot about the defense. Those guys are pretty. So where do they go? They go to TV, right? The next guys that have to know as much as the quarterback or more are your offensive linemen. They've got to be able to see and read defenses. They've got to know where who's running the routes, where they're going, all the same things the quarterback has to do. But we like to have more fun, so they put us on radio. Seems obvious.
It is obvious, and more importantly to me, offensive linemen, this is the last question. Like I said, we could go another hour, but the last question. Offensive linemen are the most team-oriented guys on any roster, on any team. And that leads for them to appreciate everything around them because they don't get a lot of headlines. All they care about is their brother offensive linemen and winning as a group. Mm-hmm. And to me, overall, that says volumes about the offensive line. And I think that's why we're where we are. All we want to do is do a great broadcast. We want Michigan to win, and that's what we're there for. And we're passionate about it, and that passion comes through the radio broadcast, comes through these microphones, and the people at home get it.
Mm-hmm. And just take, for example, like we get to work with another Hall of Famer, Dan Deerdorf.
The great and powerful Oz.
Yes. And so I get a nickname just like him. Dan and I are going to have to get together and come up with one. I know we call you the voice of Michigan football. Or
he's
Brandy.
Probably got a few that we can't use.
We'll make sure Tony has the dump button handy.
Get the bleeper.
But when you hear him talk at his Hall of Fame induction, when you hear offensive linemen talk about individual awards, it is their offensive line that they talk about. It's not them. They are there as a representative of their line.
And again, we're talking Deerdorf now, but this again goes back to your point about Michigan. Here's a guy, I don't want to blow any smoke up his skirt, but here's a guy who has been to the Mount Everest of broadcasting. He was on Monday Night Football. Mm-hmm. He has been on CBS. He's done boxing. He's been all over the world. And he retired from broadcasting. And where did he want to go? Where did he want to finish his broadcasting life?
Back home.
I want to go back home and do Michigan football and experience tailgates and the band coming out doing the M fanfare. To me, that speaks volumes of a guy, let's face it, he's been to the land of Oz. Mm-hmm. And yet, where does he go when it's all over and he wants to finish it up? He goes home.
Yep. Because there's nothing like being a part of a team. There's nothing like being in the stadium when you beat Michigan State, when you beat Notre Dame, and this year when
we're going to beat Ohio State. You're the best, John. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Whatever this guy chooses to do, Jon Jansen will be a success. A very thoughtful, bright, and talented man. Keep up with Jon on Michigan football game broadcasts, and don't forget his podcast, In the Trenches. And thanks for being with us today on Conversations With.